What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to XJW Diaries. My name is Justin. Well, today I have a very, very important video. This is an interview, but it's something much more than that. You know, when I was considering starting this channel a few years ago, I did a lot of thinking. I had already moved on, right? And I did a lot of thinking about whether I really wanted to do this or not, whether it was really worth the time. And there was a few reasons why I decided to go ahead and do it. But the main reason was because of the Watchtower's issues regarding CSA. Because out of all the issues that we can talk about on this channel, the majority of their policies have no direct impact on me currently. All right, there's definitely things I'm still healing from, but currently they have no direct impact. But the CSA issue, that's the one issue that has the potential to have impact on people who were never Jehovah's Witnesses. Reason being, if you don't report known abusers to the authorities, you leave that door open to more abuse. And that's terrifying. Especially terrifying as a father. Because as a father, one of my most important responsibilities is to keep my children safe. And part of that is being proactive. So if I am moving to a new area, there are plenty of websites out there that will let you check that area to make sure you're not moving your family right next door to someone who is a known abuser, a known offender. And so you can see this map, for an example, right? That shows all these places where these known offenders live. And as a parent, this map empowers me to make the right choice for my family. But if one of these dots was instead a Jehovah's Witness, well, then we would never know. Because Jehovah's Witnesses, in most cases, do not report known abusers to the authorities, which means that they don't have to report themselves and register as an offender, which means they don't appear on this map. And so that's why this is such a big and important issue, because this is something that, again, impacts children both within the organization and children on the outside. And so today we're speaking with someone who is a survivor of that type of abuse, but is now using her voice, along with other survivors, to try to make real change. Going through the legal system, using her connections to try to get this policy changed, to make the world safer. Again, not just for kids within these organizations, kids on the outside as well. And this is not just a Jehovah's Witness issue. There are many organizations out there, both religious and non-religious, that have this exact same issue. And this is why they are combining their voices together and asking you to join in with them. Because if we're successful in this, we can have a proper investigation. Just like they did in Australia with the ARC, we can have something like that here. And it's even more important here because this is the home country of the Watchtower organization. If we get a proper investigation here, we have a much bigger chance for real change. So with all that being said, here is Stephanie's story and her message for all of you. Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for coming onto the channel. We have probably one of the most important videos that I've done so far. With your work, this is going to be something that impacts and helps so many people. And we want to work together with you to make sure that it's as successful as possible. But before we get into that, can you just tell a little bit about your story and yourself and how you got into this in the first place?
Well, thank you very much. I actually have a little bit of an unusual background when it comes to the Jehovah's Witnesses. My mother was raised as a witness, but got pregnant and left at the age of 15. And then eventually she found herself back at the Kingdom Hall when I was 6 years old. So by the time I was 6, we became Jehovah's Witnesses. So I do remember having some Christmases and birthdays in the earlier years. Speaking of birthdays, your daughter just had a birthday. Was it her first?
Yeah, her first birthday, yep.
Oh, how much fun. Yeah, a lot of fun. So yeah, I became a Jehovah's Witness at age 6. And then for my 23rd birthday, I got one of the most phenomenal birthday gifts of all time. I got disfellowshipped. So I found myself no longer being a Jehovah's Witness. And in the meantime, I had married a worldly man. And so it was a little bit unusual. I became disfellowshipped in Pennsylvania, my home state where I'm from. And then I married a man from Minnesota. So we went to Minnesota to live, which was great for me because newly disfellowshipped, I've never had that experience where I had to live where I had also, preached and near the congregation, which I think helped me in my healing. So I have a special place of empathy for those of you that have to have that constant reminder in your life. But anyways, I married a man from Minnesota. So from the age of like 23 to 27, when I was living in Minnesota with him, my first husband, he was friends with Prince, the singer. And so through him, I knew Prince. And Prince and his bandmates all knew that I was disfellowshipped, but yet they treated me the same way as any other worldly person had been treating me, which I found very, strange. But so that's my experience. I was around the Jehovah's Witnesses from age 6 to about 27, but as a worldly person from age 23 on. At that point in my life, when I had first gotten disfellowshipped and we were in Minnesota, Prince was the most worldly person I ever knew, thought would even exist, with his crazy clothes and rock and roll music. And but little did I realize, when we go through this journey of exiting the cult, we start to find out that the real worldly people are pretty much just our governing body and the leaders of the Watchtower Society, which becomes a shock, and it does become hard to deal with. But my newly worldly life and my ex-Jehovah Witness life came crashing together in 2017. And I'll tell that story a little bit because that explains the why we've put this campaign for justice together for the community. But when in 2017, I was actually working for Tucker Quayle, who was Dan Quayle, the vice president for George Bush 1. So his father was the vice president of the United States. So we have a lot going on in our personal life that I thought I could use some of these connections that I've made in the world. So the importance of me knowing somebody like Tucker Quayle is that A, his father was a vice president of the United States, B, his brother is a lobbyist in Washington, D.C., which if you know anything about lobbyists, they're the ones that convince the government on what laws to make. So I'm hoping that with the campaign that we have put together, along with some of these connections that I've made, that we might, as a community, have a new opportunity to push our agenda of cleansing Watchtower's harmful policies. I don't think any of us really want to see the Watchtower go away, but we do want to see them treat their children better. So I'd like to kind of go over this with you and explain what we're putting together and how and why I think this might work for us. Do you have any questions right now?
No, you can go ahead and go into it. That's
Okay.
definitely very interesting that you knew Prince and you had able to make all these connections, and I mean
Yeah.
that's got to be crazy just coming out of the Watchtower, freshly disfellowshipped, and then now
Right. Right.
you're meeting all these people that you were taught to be afraid of, basically.
Right. And I found it so confusing that they were so worldly and accepted me in a worldly fashion, and Jehovah never really came up anymore.
Yeah,
And I thought I was supposed to be, the devil's child.
yeah, yeah.
I had left Jehovah, but yeah, so very, very different and unique experiences within Watchtower, yeah, and outside of Watchtower. So if I can kind of explain a little bit. So
Yeah.
I intend to use the connections that I've accumulated to press for legislation reform, which I hope also results in a criminal investigation that offers a mass scale of justice for all survivors of cult abuse, not only the CSA survivors. So it's a little bit complicated but it's not at the same time. So who I am, as a child, my name is Stephanie Lynn Carson. So I advocate under my child name. As an adult, we'll talk about this a little bit later. I did change my name legally, but myself, I became acquainted with the apostate world about 17 years ago when I first found Barbara Anderson. We all love Barbara. I found Barbara Anderson and what she and William Bill Bowen were doing. And I realized that I wasn't alone. You know, that's the that isolation can really make you feel alone. You know, when you get isolated from your community and you're isolated in the world, you have no way of knowing if what you suffered is what everyone else suffered. So the internet has really done us wonders, hasn't it? So that goes back to like 2008-ish, right, when I met Barbara Anderson. Fast forward 10 years, 2018. Well, 2017 is when my world collided. My Jehovah Witness world and my worldly world came together. So by 2018, I started advocating. You know, my instincts in me just came alive. And I started with Barbara Anderson and the SCARS group in California, changing the law called Clergy Penitent Privilege Exemption, where we attempted to change that in California in 2018 with California SB 360. So I've been around the community, but I don't necessarily do a lot of the social stuff. I do more behind the scenes. So I started in California with Barbara and her group, and then my husband and I, he's also a survivor within Watchtower. We then took to 5 additional times, so 6 times total, and in 4 different states, we have attempted to change the law called Clergy Penitent Privilege Exemption. That's the exemption that we all know that allows the crimes to go unreported because of this privilege of secrecy that the clergy class have. And then in 2019, my husband and I both testified in the Pennsylvania grand jury that we all know what's going on with the investigation into Watchtower, which is still ongoing. And then in 2020, I wrote a small book to aid my advocacy, because at that point, I had really started to make some incredible connections, you know, within the, journalists and legislators and I mean, you name it. I've made quite a few connections that I think can really help us. So my book was called Protecting Our Children by Reviewing the History of Our Stolen Patriotism. It's about the flag salute. Because another kind of crazy, interesting little fact about me is the brother that I was dating at Bethel, he was on C-SPAN talking about why the Jehovah's Witnesses don't salute the flag, which I thought was highly strange to find him on a political network. But who knows? So anyways, so we've been doing this advocacy, my husband and I, full-time since 2017. So our goal is to have legislation reform on a national level, because we've figured it out. Going state to state to state just doesn't work. We need to form a coalition with, you know, all survivors we're actually investigating not just the Jehovah's Witnesses. We're looking into the Mormons and the Scientologists. We're doing the same thing for several other cult groups, not just the Jehovah's Witnesses. So bringing all those voices together will bring us change in legislation. Now that's where knowing somebody like the Quayle family could come to benefit us as a group. The second thing is that I'm hoping for a mass scale investigation into the Watchtower harmful policies on protecting children. So how I expect to be able to formulate such a storm, if you will, is that if you go onto the website where the forms are at, it's WOW, www.worldorganizationwelfare.org. If you go on there, you'll find the bio of 3 of us girls that have come together, all former Jehovah's Witnesses. That's why the little Watchtower cartoon, because we're all former Jehovah's Witnesses. Onto the website there, you'll find us 3 girls, Stephanie Lynn Carson, that's myself, Shannon Simondinger, and Star Paul. So some of you may already know Shannon Simondinger's name because she was involved in the leaked Palmer files. I can't say that fast. Out of like the Maine area. Are you familiar with the child trafficking ring up there in the Palmer files?
No, that's something I need to look into.
Oh yeah,
And
definitely.
that was connected to the witnesses?
Yes.
Oh
So,
my goodness.
So anyways, what this is the authorities actually went into a Kingdom Hall, even though the files were all supposed to be shredded, by Watchtower. The authorities got a court order and went into some of these Kingdom Halls on good intel, and extracted the case files on a lot of these cases. So have you heard in Maine, his name is Ernie Fiance? There was a case about a year ago.
Yeah, that one sounds familiar.
Okay, that came out of the Palmer files. That happened because of the Palmer files.
Wow.
So, and he has been found guilty on all charges and is currently in jail. So the reason I'm telling you this is on there, Shannon Simondinger, she was in that criminal case as one of the survivors. And now she's come forward with her own, civil case against Watchtower, which has already been filed in the, in the state of Maine. And so if you go on there, you'll find her little biography, but underneath each of our biographies, there's like little links where you can read different news articles that pertain to us specifically, like ones that I'm in or ones that she's in. And the same with Star Paul. Star is also a survivor of child sex trafficking within the Jehovah's Witnesses. So our cases, us 3 girls, our cases are all different, but yet the same. Star Paul was trafficked in a pedo film production, if you will, or in the Jehovah's Witnesses. Okay, so they were making films. I had the same experience. She was in California. I was in Pennsylvania. I had the same experience of being videotaped. And then we have in the Palmer files where we have the proof of the existence of a not only the concealment of child trafficking, but that it could almost be rightly defined as being an organized trafficking situation. So the 3 of us are coming forward. Shannon has already filed. I'm filing, and Star I believe, will be filing as well. I think she'll be filing with the class action lawsuit. So we have a lot that's about to come out. And, you know, as survivors, you only get the opportunity once to truly use your voice. And that's part of what suing Watchtower is all about. It's not about getting money. It's about making change. And the only way you can make change is with your voice. That's why they've tried to take our voice from us, right? So the three of us, that's how we want to use our voices when all of these cases come out very quickly together. So we hope to use the momentum that will build, along with the connections that I've been able to make in the political and worldly arena to people that, you know, have the ability to make changes. We're just hoping to combine those efforts that will result in a mass healing of what had happened to all of us. I hope that makes sense to you. What I'm saying is that, you know, we want to, like Candace Conti, when she came out, you know, you have opportunities. The media now comes to you. You don't have to chase the media. So all of us girls know that we're going to have an opportunity to use our voice in this manner. And we wondered how we could best help the entire community instead of just trying to help ourselves. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the specifics of things.
Please do.
Americans, I don't know if you know this or not, are the #1 consumer of pedophile materials. And as former cult members, we'd be daft to believe that Watchtower cannot somehow find themselves implicated in such crimes. Just with the 3 cases that I have just mentioned to you coming out, the 3 of us girls, you know, that's proof in itself that they do allow trafficking and various forms of trafficking. So if we go into the Australia Royal Commission, which I'm sure you're familiar with, in Australia, the report concluded that although 25% of the Australian population are Catholic, the abuse that was reported in that report was 4,444 cases for 25% of their national population. Now let's compare that to the population of Jehovah's Witnesses in Australia, which is 0.4%. So less than half of 1% of people in Australia are Jehovah's Witnesses. And they had 1,800 cases reported. So nearly half as many for, you know, a much, I mean, there's no comparing the population density. So when you look at the amount of abuse that's happening within Watchtower and the abuse combined with not being reported, it's a breeding ground for these criminal syndicates and to operate in. Like I mentioned earlier, the Palmer files are proof of the existence of child trafficking. Likewise, a similar investigation in Brazil resulted in all the Catholic bishops stepping down in the entire country. I think it was Brazil. I might be wrong on that country. But could you imagine if our government here in the United States were to forcibly remove Watchtower leadership on these same crimes against humanity that are inflicted upon our children of Watchtower? Can you imagine if they took that stand? I believe that the real change of Watchtower, you know, because it is a global organization, but it's founded here in America, I believe, America has to be the one to truly deal with this issue. And because I work in the political and government arena, I notice things that maybe other people might not notice, because, we all have our own things we look at, right? So, like him or not, okay, in 2017, Donald Trump wrote an executive order 13818, which blocks all properties of those involved with serious violations of human rights abuses. So, I wonder, how could we use that to our advantage? That would be the ultimate goal, is to get that executive order to apply, right? So, I'm going to pause on that part, and then I want to go back and kind of explain a little bit more of my story.
Yeah, please.
So, my husband and I grew up in the same Kingdom Hall together, and we were both drugged and forcibly taken advantage of. My brother, who has since passed away, he was also a victim of the same man as my husband. And we have other young boys, I say young because at the time the crimes happened when they were young, that have also come forward within our home congregation. So I had told you earlier that my world came crashing down in 2017. I had to go back and face reality in a way that shook my faith, in not just if there's a God, but in humanity as a whole. Going back to when I was a Jehovah Witness child. So we became witnesses when I was 6. And in 5 short years later, we were being abused. And the abuse within that, it happened quickly, is what I'm saying. The abuse that my brother was suffering led him to run away from home. He was 15 years old. I was 11. Now, when he ran away from home, just like the elders tell people to not report cases of child abuse for fear that it would be found out why he ran away, the body of elders instructed my family to not involve the authorities in my brother's disappearance. So ultimately, there's bits and pieces of the story, but ultimately my brother lived on the streets for 30 years. He never was able to find himself again. The trauma of what he dealt with was too difficult for him. And then in 2017, he lost his life to a heroin overdose, at which time, he was still homeless. So when I went to pick up his belongings, so I need to remind the audience here that even though I just say that my brother was homeless for 30 years, and then I went to pick up his belongings, we had been estranged most of that time. My brother was actually identified with fingerprints, and the authorities then found the family to let us know, where his remains and stuff could be picked up. So when I went to pick up his belongings, I found a little pair of baby shoes. And that's when I realized I needed to find a child who was quite possibly living on the streets. With a life of homelessness, you can imagine the depravity that one might have to resort to in order to survive. My brother was no stranger to the life of an abused child that then forced him into prostitution and drug dealing and other such things, So I I knew he had a child, a little baby, and I was very determined to find this baby, and just to make sure that he or she, it's a he, would be able to have a life that was free of the despairs that his father had endured. No child should be on the street. So I didn't know if I was looking for a boy or a girl, but I created these skills because I was looking for a child. I created these mad detective skills within me. It took me several years, and I will tell you, it was not it was not the institution of the police. It was not the institution of child safety services. It was not any institution that helped me, but it was individual people within those institutions, such as the policeman that gave me information off the record, or someone in a courthouse in like the records department that would give me paperwork that I wasn't supposed to have, that put all of this together, right, to where I was able to find a needle in a haystack, a child that I did not even know if it was a boy or girl. I was able to locate him and to ensure his ongoing safety. So, taking those detective skills and combining it with my husband's mad scientist skills, like he's super smart. He actually almost worked for Elon Musk twice. But we decided to put our focus on finding within the network of survivors to fairly and accurately identify as many of these pedophile rings that we can identify, because as we find connections with my case to someone else's case, it forms, our own stories start to form a bigger picture, which helps everyone. So, going back to Shannon Simondinger, the girl from the Palmer Files, right? I did not know her during my Jehovah Witness days, and I did not meet her until about 2018 when I was doing my advocacy, correct? So the interesting thing was, even though she was several states away from where I grew up and where my abuse took place, our stories ended up connecting together through mutual people. That's the thing. The world is big, but when you're a cult such as Jehovah's Witnesses, it becomes a very closed world. I mean, look at just the EXJW community, how connected we are. So her case ended up tying into my case because the brother that was on her disfellowshipping committee was actually a relative of mine. So that's when we started to realize that our cases, probably more of our cases, tie in together than we realize. So taking my detective skills and my husband's mad science skills, and friends of his, I can't give him all the credit because these other people have been amazingly helpful. We've got like this computer program that's like next generation, where we can put in the data and then it connects similarities for us so that we can start putting these connections together. And it's been quite remarkable to watch. So the importance of that is that having those connections will thus help other survivors that might not necessarily have enough evidence on their own to bring forth a case. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, good. So let's go back to that executive order that I mentioned. and how I see this playing out if all goes well. So we have these several lawsuits coming out. Now, my brother has passed away. And when I decided to use my voice, and yes, I've been using my voice, advocating for law change, working with investigators such as the Pennsylvania grand jury and other places I've been involved in, like Utah and Tennessee, in some investigations. So putting all of that together, and seeing things, this Executive Order 13818, it blocks all properties of those involved with serious violations of human rights abuses. And now that executive order, it's known as the Global Magnitsky, Magnitsky Sanctions Act, or the program. So you can find this on the U.S. Department of State on their website, okay? So if you want to read into what that entails. So what are the human rights abuses? And this is very interesting to me. Not only is the United States the number one consumer, and I've also heard number one producer, I wouldn't doubt that, at least the number one consumer of child pornography materials, right? The United States is the only nation in the world that has not yet ratified the CRC. And the CRC is the United Nations Conventions on the human rights of the child. So we have a real problem in America. And if you go back and you look at the Australia Royal Commission, everyone says the Catholics, the Catholics, the Catholics. Go back and look at the Australian Royal Commission and compare the numbers. Catholics to Jehovah's Witnesses. Jehovah's Witnesses, much worse, like 24 times more likely to be abused as a Jehovah's Witness child than a Catholic child. So what does that say of the Watchtower cult? And what does that say of the other cults? And like I said earlier, the cults in focus are American cults. So I believe we need to address that here in America. That's why I believe this executive order, which still is in place, it was placed there in 2017. I believe that executive order will come in handy if we can execute properly, if we can get this together as a group. So the USA has not ratified the United Nations Conventions on the Right of a Child. What are the rights of a child? They have the right to survival, the right to education. The next right is the right for protection from violence and abuse. The next one, here's one that every Jehovah's Witness child has suffered. Their human rights for freedom of expression, including where they source their material in order to form their own thoughts. That's a protected right of the human rights of the child. They also have the human right to participate in decision making that affects them personally. So that would be, the ultimate step is to get us all in front of the United Nations to address that much larger issue. So to sum it up, I want to take and Shannon wants to take, and Star wants to take our stories that are coming forward to, bring justice for everyone. So the class action lawsuit, when I found this attorney that I will be filing with, I told him that it was only fair and just that my brother, who spent 30 years on the streets, would also be given a voice. And I asked him if there's any possible way that he could represent my deceased brother in a case. We're checking into the legality of that. But what we did decide in the meantime, whether or not we can bring a case forward for my brother Douglas or not, that it would be in his honor that we would initiate a class action lawsuit, which anyone can come forward. Now, it's very important for us to understand the difference between filing under a CSA allegation, which holds statutory limits. I'm sure there's a lot of the survivors out there that want to file but haven't been able to because, the crime happened and then the statute of limitations has run out, and so now they can't seek civil justice. So the difference is by us outlining and clearly defining the ways that the trafficking occurs and repeats because of the secrecy, partially because of the secrecy. There'll be other issues brought forward. That we believe that we can qualify many cases, even those that might not be clearly defined as trafficking cases, such as in my instance in Star Paul and Shannon Simondinger. In those instances, which are all clearly definable human trafficking, we believe that the secrecy and showing how the networks work. Remember with the Catholics, they would just take the priest and send him off to another church. Well, the Kingdom Hall is doing that as well. So we believe that we've kind of set up a good plan of attack, and we want to invite everyone. Now, the investigation that we're doing, with this phenomenal it's like a formula thing that is created to put all this together. It better connects as many of our individual cases to further add to the burden of proof that is required when you file a civil case. So the difference between a civil case and a criminal case, civil cases, the complainant will be awarded a judgment, meaning monetary funds. And a criminal case, there's a much higher burden of proof. So with a civil case, you only have to prove your case by the preponderance of the evidence, meaning that you only need a 51% of the evidence favorable to the plaintiff in order for the ruling to come back favorable. So we have a really good chance if we put our voices together. So I hope that explains who I am, the passions behind what we're doing, how we expect to hopefully push the cause a little bit further. So that's about it. I don't know if you have any questions or anything.
No, you said it beautifully said, really beautifully said.
Oh,
And it
good.
really shows, number one, it shows the power that we have. We use our voice.
We
Number
do.
two, it shows, and this is something that I didn't even think about. The majority of these CSA cases that come out are one-on-one, the abuser and the abused.
Yes.
But as you're showing, this is very well organized. And why wouldn't it be when, we have an organization that actively does not turn in known abusers to the authorities. So of course
Right.
you're going to have more people coming in. They're going to organize with each other, and unfortunately, this is what happens.
Yes.
So can you talk about how other people can join in with you and add their voice to your voices?
Yeah. So I guess I'm just encouraging everyone to have each of their own individual cases reevaluated, whether that's with an attorney in your own state, if you want to file privately on your own through CSA, or have them look at the trafficking laws, which holds no statute of limitations. Child trafficking holds no statute of limitations. Or to go ahead and contact the attorney that will be handling the class action lawsuit. So we've made it easy. I think I sent you the forms if you want to put those underneath your thing, that'd be great.
Yeah, put them in the description. Yes.
I appreciate that. Yeah. And then on the website, we have several languages available. But just for America, okay, so just the United States, the class action civil lawsuit applies. And on the website, www.worldorganizationwelfare.org, you will find an attorney-client form. Now, that form was created with the assistance of the attorney, and it's a small questionnaire. At the bottom of the questionnaire, there's his address to one of his offices where you'll be sending the letters, and then the letters will then be opened under attorney-client privilege, and each case will then be evaluated, and then you'll be contacted by the attorney's office to see how they may further help you, whether you decide to go individually on a case or join my brother's class action lawsuit. Whether or not he gets to be named on there or not, we don't know. But one of the beautiful things he did when he ran away is he went to the court systems and he was able to get the perpetrator placed behind bars. And like I said, I've been given some information from the courts and police and other people along the way that I wasn't supposed to have. So I actually have those court records of him as a young boy. So if you want to partake in the class action lawsuit, I highly encourage you to do that. If you are participating in the class action lawsuit, I also highly encourage you to fill out the redress form. The redress form is what we'll be using to push for legislation reform, to push for whoever might be president when the time comes. I mean, we started this when Biden was in office, so now it's Trump. Who knows who will be next? But we want to get an executive order to remove that privilege if we can't get the legislation to go through. And then we also want to get to the Human Rights Council. Our letters combined, the redress forms that will be sent separately to, there's 2 addresses at the bottom of that form. Our voices together will be able to bring about change. And then our stories, which in the redress forms, we do not want details of your abuse. We simply want you to define the abuse. Of course, if you want to share, we're more than willing to be a listening ear, but we don't need those details for this part of it. If this ever gets traction, like we hope it will, then at that point, such as like when we were working with the Attorney General in Pennsylvania, then they call you in, and if your case is going to help what they have going on. So yeah, we have the class action, and then we have the redress form. Now, the class action is just for abuse survivors of a sexual nature that occurred during childhood, that the Watchtower knew of and concealed. But the redress form covers a variety of things. It actually covers, so if you read over the redress form, I dare say that there is not a single ex-Jehovah's Witness that would not qualify to fill this redress form out, because it covers trafficking, CSA, SRA, human rights violations, the raping of a child or an adult, forced labor, other crimes involving bodily harm or the threat thereof, including battery, assault, and domestic violence. Additionally, offenses such as harassment, stalking, and kidnapping are also considered crimes against the person. So no matter when this occurred or where this occurred. So the Watchtower petition is a global petition and available to everyone globally. That way we have this to go to the UN, right? So the redress is for global participation on a variety of crimes against the person, and the class action lawsuit is for survivors within the United States. And we decided to, expand it beyond just these sexual crimes because a very dear friend of mine, I think we all will remember what happened when the world shut down with COVID, right? A very dear friend of mine who grew up as a Jehovah's Witness living in Rome, Italy. When the world shut down in Rome or in Italy, the Jehovah's Witnesses, certain Jehovah's Witnesses, came after her with a baseball bat and beat her near death because it was Armageddon and time for her to die. So I had to add that in there because so many of us have suffered so much. And it's not, sometimes we think what we suffered wasn't as great as what others have suffered because, so-and-so was raped over the course of 10 years or so-and-so, had to deal with domestic abuse. I never had to deal with that or whatever. We've all been injured by this very harmful organization. And so I wanted to give, in the redress, I wanted to give opportunity for everyone to have a voice. So that's why we opened it up this way.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Thank you.
And like you had mentioned with that previous executive order, just being a child and not having the freedom to take in information from multiple sources of your choice to form your
Right.
own opinions about the world, that in itself also falls under these human rights violations. So
It's
that's an easy one for all XJWs.
I know, right? Yeah, it's just amazing when you start to learn about this and realize how injured your soul really is. And a lot of people are asking about the website where these forms are found because it is it's like a religious 501 something. But I think I should explain a little bit about that. So the three of us girls that are on there, we don't expect you to believe spiritually, religiously the way that we do. And we try not to judge people in the way that they believe because everyone has their own journey. I'm not a Christian. Two of the girls on the website are Christians. And the girl who owns the website, most importantly, it's Her Truth and Ministry. She is a trafficking survivor. She is a former Jehovah's Witness. And predominantly, she has been using her voice in the secular field, the same as I have been using my voice in the secular field to bring about these types of changes. So it's a reflection of her personal journey. I want to assure the community that it is only Star is the one and only member of that church, if you will. And she invited us to use her space because it is a ministry of truth and justice. It was just a convenient place for us to drop our information. Just as I'm asking all the other podcasters and content creators to also offer the forms. So it's not it might look affiliated with WOW, but it's more just a place to drop the forms. But I'm willing to talk. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. And thank you for bringing that up because I know there's people out there who are just waking up and they're still dealing with, the effects of religious trauma and just seeing those words sometimes just gets them out. Yeah.
I understand it completely. Like I said, I'm not Christian, but I have been able to find peace with some of, with people's religious connection, spiritual connections, however those form. But I remember I used to, people would tell me, Jesus loves you. And I'd laugh and I'd say, oh yeah, his name's Jesus. he's working over here, helping me do this or, or whatever. Yeah, he's my buddy from work. His name's Jesus. Just make a joke of it. But I have found in my own journey that it's all the same but different in the ways that we believe. It's just how we can translate those beliefs into something that means something to our own self. And that's why they abuse us, is to disconnect us from our soul, which is the inner thoughts that are left when you go to complete silence. And I do want to make an interesting point. You know, there's a lot of talk right now about satanic ritual abuse, and I'm under the conclusion that it does exist, but I define it even more loosely that each of us were satanically abused, because the true definition of satanic abuse is a splitting of the mind. And in order to survive a cult or an organization that expects perfectionism, similar to it reminds me of the Puritans, right? In the early America, the Puritans. So if your organization expects perfection, but yet you have to survive in an imperfect world, you automatically create two personas. One that's a Jehovah's Witness persona, and one that you create not necessarily to do bad or to sin against Jehovah, but you have to create this second persona just to go to work and to survive in the world. Right. So, to me, that is satanic abuse. And each and every one of us, we may have come out of that and healed from that split, but they did that to each and every one of us, no matter what your age was in the cult, if you took it seriously.
Yeah, very, 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 very well said. I don't think a lot of people think about that split that happens, but it is there.
Yeah.
And the more deeper you were into the religion, the more you were severed from yourself.
Yes.
So.
And then the first thing they do as soon as you show any signs of having a double life, they they punish you for what they created, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Which is further satanic, or human rights abuses, however you want to define it. It's just another word, even though it's a spiritual Christian way of defining things. I found that the Christians think that the demons are really what some of us might call a mental illness, or like our triggers. So it's interesting, kind of getting into the minds of other people, and there's a full spectrum. But that's the beauty of us waking up outside of the cult, is that we find that we are allowed to ask questions. We are allowed to be unique and different, and that even our spiritual journey, healing journey of finding the self is unique and special, and should be divinely, or protected at all cost, which I believe is, the purpose of the Human Rights Council of the United Nations. But then again, they're men, so we have to do it. We can't put our trust in them. But it does give us opportunity to bring light to something, because they've offered us something to talk about. So let's talk about it.
100%. I have one last question for you. And you've already answered this on another channel, but just for the sake of this audience,
sure.
For the people out there that are PMO that would like to come forward in this, they're trying to keep their identity hidden. They're still stuck within the witnesses for whatever reason.
Yes.
Can they participate, and can they keep their identity anonymous?
Secret, anonymous? Yeah. Yes, absolutely, yes. And so the forms, the ones going to the attorney, obviously, are attorney-client privilege, and the forms coming into the investigation team, the people have been vetted. They've been doing this type of work for years, and I promise that everything will be dealt with in the most delicate manner possible. For those that don't, just make a special note on your paper, and we actually have a question on there, whether you want to be contacted or not, or I can't remember exactly how it reads, but there is a box to check on there if you don't want that known. So
Perfect.
yeah,
Awesome.
one of the things, question 18, would it be okay for an attorney or investigator to contact you for more information or clarifications? And, so just write something in there, obviously check the box no. And, if you want to elaborate a little bit, please. But, don't. And also, that's another important thing for people to understand. As a child has the right to protection, not only from the abuse or violence, but also from the protection of outing it, such as like in the gay and lesbian world, it's a big thing if you out someone, right? Well, it's the same with a child. They are protected. So even if you're an adult now coming forward, it's very probable that you can file your case as a John or Jane Doe, and never, have your child identity known. So that's another. And the lawsuit will cost no money to anyone unless the judgment comes back favorable for you. So the attorney takes on all of the costs that are involved with it, and you don't get any money unless we win money for you, right? And no one is benefiting from this. I'm not taking any kickbacks or anything like this. The attorney that I have found, he's actually my fourth attorney that I've hired in my pursuit against Watchtower. But it was important to me that someone was willing to take on my brother's case. One, because it tells a bigger story. And two, there's the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So for me to come out as a CSA survivor, I didn't feel like it told enough of the story because I was trafficked. And I wanted someone brave enough to define it for what it was and to pursue justice for what it truly was.
That's beautiful. Yeah, and it's what we deserve. It's what anybody who has gone through that experience, especially as a child, it's what they deserve. So
Yes.
I really hope people will join in on your cause and use their voice to to get these lawyers the information that they need. Because if we do this correctly, what happened in Australia with the ARC can happen here. We can get a proper investigation. And through
Yes.
that investigation, we can actually get some policy changes. Just like
Right.
Stephanie said, it's not necessarily about taking down the Watchtower. People are going to believe what they want to believe. Listen, you take down the Watchtower today, tomorrow there'll be 10 new groups, 10 new splinter groups, and at least 5 of those will be far worse than the Watchtower is.
True.
But the main goal of this will be to get policy change. That way, the people that are in the organization that won't leave, that won't listen to us, the children that are born into it that have no choice, that don't know any better, they can now be in a safer environment. So,
Yes.
you have any last things to say?
Just as a society as a whole, I mean, you touched on it right there. As a society as a whole, we have to do better for our children. And if we don't first start with our institutions of morality, then, I feel that we have no hope as a civilized world.
I 100% agree. Yeah, that's the next generation. If you ruin the the next generation, your future is ruined. That's
Right,
it.
right. Yeah, exactly. It's a steady downfall. And I think
Yes.
it was purposely designed that way, to occur this way. I think our children were abused for the purpose of creating a very disturbed world, which would need, yeah.
Yeah. I hear you.
Yeah.
On that.
Yeah. I won't go into it.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother podcast. or 2 or 12.
Yeah. Well, shoot. Well, thanks again for coming back on, or coming on, and we will for
Yeah,
sure have to have you back on because I know there's a
please.
lot more
Yeah.
to your story, and but this is very important to get out there. So I'm glad you came on and
Thank
got in
you.
contact with me to get this message out there. And again, for all you watching, I really hope that if you have a story to tell, that you join in on this cause. This is how real change happens. You get in touch with the right people who have the right connections. Now we can have movement. So it's not just
Yes.
talking, now we're doing.
Yeah, it's not what you know, it's who you know. That's how you
Hmm.
get through in this world. And so, I'm not trying to brag or anything, but I've met a lot of people that have a lot of power, influence, and um, I just want to try to use it for everyone, um, for whatever that means to you.
Yeah, yeah. And it'll be good. It'll be good.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I
yeah, thanks
agree.
thanks so much for coming on. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah,
Thank you.
thank
Thank
you
you for
so
your
much.
time.
Be in touch. Don't be a stranger. Any questions? Reach out. And this is just the beginning of something big that we're all going to be involved with over the next, hopefully, several years. Whatever produces from this, but yeah, watch for us girls because we're going to get out there in the front of this, and we hope to
And how fitting.
shake and get some movement. So
Yeah. And how fitting that women who were the most pushed down in that organization are now the ones to lead this
yeah,
battle for justice. That's couldn't be any better than that. If you have a story to tell, this is your chance to tell it. And as she said, when it comes to these CSA issues and trafficking, there is no statute of limitations. So it could have been 20, 30, 50 years ago. You still have the right to use your voice. And by using your voice and combining it with these people, we have a chance here for some real change. We have a chance here to get a proper investigation done, just like they had in Australia. We can have that here. The results of that investigation, I think, will be far, far worse than any of us can even imagine. But we can't get there unless we all work together. So I have the links down in the description. Please check them out. If not for yourself, then maybe perhaps somebody that you know that you can send it to who has a story to tell. Please share it around. Let's make this thing a success, because by doing that, we are helping many, many generations down the line. I mean, you got to think about that. This is a multi-generational effort that we are doing here. How many generations of children will be saved from that trauma if we are successful? So let's be successful. Let's make it happen. And I want to thank you all for watching. Thanks again for Stephanie for coming on. Thank you all for your time. Please take it easy on yourself, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.